Hello and welcome back to the StoneburnerBooks YouTube channel. Today we're going to do something a little bit different than what I typically do here on my channel, and that is I'm going to take you along on one of my custom orders. So I have an entire box here of books that a client sent to me, so we're going to get started. Before we jump into the project, I just want to give you a brief background of what I'll be doing and why I came to get these books. So the client for this project has purchased books for me in the past. These were journals that I created using vintage Little House on the Prairie book covers, and I took out the original pages, put in fresh pages, and they purchased them off of my website maybe a year ago or so, and they decided that they wanted some more journals in the same style with different books in the Little House series. So they found different volumes and sent them to me. We also have one bonus book that I will show you in the video, but I have a whole box full of books ready to be turned into journals. Okay, so as I mentioned, I have several different volumes. This one is These Happy Golden Years. So that's one. I also have The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, and then the last one in the series is On the Banks of Plum Creek. So these two books look great and must have been in somebody's collection, but these two other books, you can see the shine there, that is plastic packing tape, and you can see these were part of a library. So I have a little bit of work to do to get this plastic tape off of the book. Before I sent my project proposal to this customer, I made sure that I could lift this tape a little bit and that it wouldn't rip away too much, because I do want to use definitely this part of the spine. I may keep some of the spines whole, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be lifting off any of the original fabric or designs. So the client had reached out and asked me about doing these Little House books, and I said, sure, absolutely. I love this vintage look, and just even the colors and the designs. I really love these. And then after we had started chatting about this one, they asked if they could send me one more Reader's Digest because they know that I also make those. And they sent me a photo of this cover and this pattern, and I said, yes, absolutely, send me this one. Let me get these out of the way. So you can see this one is actually already broken a little bit and missing some of its pages here. So that's totally fine. This is a perfect one to use for my upcycled journals so that I can take it apart and put fresh pages in it. I definitely want to reuse some of this end sheet paper. I usually like to cut out these book plates and glue them onto the front cover when I use them, but I think this one's going to be a really fun one to work with as well. So we've got 4 Little House books and then the other Reader's Digest book to work on in this order. Before I put together my quote for this client, what I did was I went through and filled out my custom book project worksheet, and I started making these because a lot of times I'm working with clients and we're going back and forth via email, and there might be many different messages exchanged, and we're talking about, you know, what types of pages, what things we want to make sure we include. So I started making these worksheets just so that I could have information, exactly what I need, to make sure I don't miss anything. And then especially for this one where I'm doing 5 books at once, I use the backside to really go through every single book, assess it, and look at what I think that it should need or use. I noted if it had tape on the spine or no tape, and this just really helps me get an idea of what I want to do with each book, and also plan so that I'm not doing exactly the same thing in every book, because this client in particular wanted a mix of lined and unlined, and they did want a decal edge. So this way it just really helps me plan out, and that way when I get to the book I can just say, okay, Reader's Digest, I want to use this color, and I want to make sure I have these different things in there, integrating the fly leaves into some of the book that I'm going to make, and you know, we'll have blank pages and a decal edge on it. So that's one way that I just help organize my information. So now that you've seen the books in their raw form and kind of the worksheet that I work through and how I plan everything out, I'm going to show you parts of the process along the way. Now this may look different each time I show you something, because this is 5 books, and even though editing and the internet can make it look like it only took a half hour to do, or 10 minutes, or whatever the length of this video ends up being, it really, please know, this is taking me, it'll probably take me about a week to work on all of these and finish them up, maybe even going into next week. But I'm gonna pop in throughout the entire process of all of the books and give you an insight into what I'm doing, and then of course I will check in and show you all of them at the very end once they're done. Up first are the 2 books that have tape on the spine. Because I'm working on 5 books at one time, I want to make sure that I can work on everything at the same time. So when I am cutting the original pages out, I want to be able to do that for all the books. So the ones that need special attention will get that first. I have a few tools that I'll be using. This one is a micro spatula. I used it a lot in my book preservation days, but it's still incredibly helpful to have around. I also have a little pair of tweezers. These are really helpful, especially for grabbing little teeny pieces. I think I might have to use them to pull some tape potentially. And then I have an adhesive pickup, and this is kind of like an eraser, but it will pull up any of that sticky residue left over. So my main plan for this, let's just take one at a time. And the way that I worked on this when I first tested it out is just there was a little bit of an air hole here. Let me bring that a little bit closer. So I got mine right here in the hinge is where there's a little bit of space where the tape was not adhered to the cover. So I'm just putting my micro spatula in there, and I'm just going to work very slowly and kind of go back and forth to wiggle it and just try to remove that tape. Now, the one thing that was really helpful to know for this is that it did lift up fairly easily on my test run, because if it hadn't, that would have indicated that potentially this would have been damaged in the process. But even just this little bit is coming up pretty quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with trying to pull this up, and hopefully it'll come up in one full piece. Okay, so I am at a little bit of a situation where this part is, it's a little bit hard to pull it up because it's still attached down here. So I'm just taking my scissors and loosening up this edge here. And then again, whenever it's a little bit too tight here on this part, I am just going back to that hinge area where there's some air space, so I can put my micro spatula in it and then coming back out. And my micro spatula is getting a little bit sticky, so I can also use my adhesive pickup to just kind of get some of that stickiness off of the micro spatula. Okay, with this first part of the tape removed, I can feel underneath now, and it's really not that sticky, which is great. I will use this. You can see on the bottom part here, there's just a tiny line of dirt where the edge of that adhesive came out and kind of got the dirt adhered to the stickiness. So just using my adhesive pickup, I can erase that basically and make sure that it's not sticky at all. So I'll use this along the spine and the cover to just kind of clean it up. I might need to use an actual eraser as well, but so far it does not feel very sticky. I will finish removing all of the tape and then check back in with you once we're ready to cut down our covers. Okay, just popping back in here, I finished taking all of the tape off of this one and it came up great. No damage on the spine, you know, from prior to them putting the tape on, which was great. However, I just took off the first part of this one, and as I was pulling this back, I realized, aha, there was actually damage to this book's spine before, and that's why they taped it up. I think the green one was more like preventative. So you can see that this part's all detached. So the way I had done the first book was I kind of just took off this part and then pulled off the spine and then worked my way around to the back. But I think what I'm going to have to do for this one is I've done the complete side on the front, and then I think I'm going to have to remove the tape on this side and then see what happens with the spine, because it may still be connected down here at this end. And if it is, if the cloth is still connected, it looks pretty good right here. I may be able to then pull from the bottom and go up to get the rest of the tape off. So this one's a little bit more difficult than the other one, but we'll still make it work. Okay, so it wasn't too bad getting the tape off. There's a little bit of pull away here on the back. The front cover was worse, so I just attacked it from the back and pulled it down the spine here. But this one, the book is definitely more sticky, and you can kind of see this lighter or darker part right here. So I'm going to use my adhesive pickup and work on getting that stickiness away, and hopefully that will also pull up some of the dark coloring, because I can tell that it's a little bit of just the adhesive is making it darker, but also the dirt. You can see how it kind of like pulls up these little teeny things. So the other book, the green one, and then again the front cover of this one, they weren't too bad in terms of stickiness. The green one especially was not very sticky, just it had a couple of spots where it was a little bit sticky. And see, now I can run my finger here and not feel stickiness until I get back down to this section over here. But this one, the blue book, has been a little bit more sticky. Even though at first glance the tape appeared to be pretty much the same, I do believe that these both came from the same library. They have markings on the inside, so presumably they're using the same or similar tape, but it could be just one was put on much farther, back in the past, and degraded more. But this is working really well, I think, especially because it's kind of a canvasy type cloth. So it gives me something to really like, there's a texture to it to rub against. Sometimes if you're using an adhesive pickup on a material that is more smooth, it kind of just like swirls the adhesive around and it makes it harder to pick up. But the texture of this book cloth is really being helpful for taking off all of this stickiness and some of the dirt. You can see there's still a little bit of a line here, but this is all starting to feel very smooth. And after I do the adhesive pickup, I've been going back in just with my eraser as well, just to see if I can get some of the dirt off of the book. It has not been working very well. Again, these books were very well loved, which is awesome, but you can tell that there's some staining here. I think it adds to the character of the book, but I will continue to work on getting all the stickiness off of this spine and then doing a little bit of cleanup. So we are joining back now, and all of my spines have been cleaned up and all the stickiness is gone. I did a light surface cleaning on the books that needed it. So now I'm ready to get started on removing the actual text blocks from the covers. So I'm going to start with this Reader's Digest and just kind of show you the process. Remember back at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that this one was already kind of coming apart. So I'm gonna just take that one chunk out of here, but the others are still really well attached. And I don't go in kind of willy-nilly because I know I want to save this paper and I want to make sure that I'm not messing up this edge because I am reusing the covers. So I go in with a blade, and usually I just kind of gently pull apart here. And let's see if I can get this on camera. So I usually just go very slowly. I'm trying to just cut right in between the, basically I'm cutting the end sheet here and just cutting that. I don't want to stick my blade through the spine because sometimes I reuse that, and sometimes, and even if I don't reuse it to keep the spine whole, I will sometimes reuse it to make a bookmark out of it. So I like to make sure I am saving as much usable material as possible. So again, just when I get to the bottom, I flip it over, and there we go. So you'll see in here, if you see this little material that's kind of like cheesecloth, that's called the super, and usually it is in books. It just helps hold the text block in with the covers. It's something that, you know, this is where my background as a book preservationist and in book repair has really been helpful. So that's something just to be aware of, that you will find that material inside the book. You can really see how the book is put together here with the pages, the text block, and having the supers usually just sewn to this, or I mean not sewn, glued to the spine, and then a paper cover over top of that, and then the super extends into the actual cover. So I've got one cover free, and I could just always double check and make sure that I didn't put any holes through the outside of the cover. And then I just do the same thing on the other side. It's a lot easier on the second side simply because you can fold your cover back so that it's really out of the way. But again, I just go carefully. Usually that super doesn't start way up at the top. It usually starts a little bit in. So often the first cut is pretty easy, and then it gets a little bit more difficult as you go down, depending on the publisher and who made the book. Sometimes those supers are really sticky and have lots of glue. So again, just go slowly. It's better to go slowly and not cut into stuff than to go really quickly and ruin whatever you're working with. So now I have my cover here. I am going to save these end sheets here because I want to integrate them into the book in some way. So I'm going to just take my text block and set that aside. And now I have my covers. And the next step for me, I'm going to do this off camera because it is a little bit more tedious work, but I will trim up this. I will cut the spine out, this middle part, so that I can prepare these as book covers. So in the end, when we start binding, the edge of the book cover will be right here, and this is what we'll have. So I'm really excited to get started on this, and I will check in with you once I have all my covers prepped and ready to go. So I just finished working for an hour or two-ish, cutting down all of the covers, getting them ready, and I just wanted to show you all one thing before I start. So some of these, the two that I already mentioned came from a library. when they discarded them, they X'd it out. So I am going to be using some of the original illustrations just to make, to kind of cover up those markings. But I am going to keep the original library card, especially because it doesn't have anybody's names on it. I wanted to make sure it doesn't have like personal information, and it doesn't. So I think that's a really fun detail to keep. So now I'm gonna glue everything down. Okay, so it's the next day after I last chatted with you, and I have all of my covers here in the weights. Instead of using a book press, I use boards and bricks. So I like to finish off the edges, and I mentioned in that last clip that I needed to cover up some items that were some markings on the inside of the books. So I needed to glue stuff. I let everything sit overnight just to make sure that everything's really like solidly adhered, even though the glue I use, which is PVA, only takes 3 to 4 hours to dry. I like to just leave it overnight to make sure everything's good. So the next step from here is that I will unpack the presses, get all of the books covers out, and start making measurements for the page sizes, as well as where I want to put the holes for the Coptic binding. Because 4 of them are essentially the same book, it should go more easily or quickly because the measurements should be either exactly the same or just a hair off, which means that I can batch all of them together, except for the Reader's Digest. The Reader's Digest one is much smaller. I have done many of those types of books before, so I have measurements for pages, and if I want to print lines on the pages, I have a template for that. I just have to check that that particular cover does meet those same dimensions. So I always write stuff down. I always try to keep track. I probably somewhere in my studio have the measurements from the original Little House on the Prairie books, but I don't think I'm going to spend the time to find those. I think I'm just going to go straight into measuring these and kind of checking against each other and making sure that they fit. So that's kind of the next steps. I'll batch everything together, and it's nice to do all the tasks at once so that I'm not gluing the covers on one book and then making all of the pages and then going back and taking apart the next book and gluing. You know, I get the whole workbench dirty when I was taking stuff apart and taking off that old glue, and now it's all cleaned up and I can work on just getting all the pages prepped. So I will show you that part of the process next. Okay, so it's time to work on my pages and preparing those for all of my covers. I am starting with the blank pages first, and what I'm doing right now is doing the decal edge on each side. Now this is a fake decal edge because a true one comes in the paper making process, so this is just to give that decal effect, but I do hand tear every single edge. Well, the side edges. I don't do the top and the bottom. These pages will need to be trimmed down, but what I like to do is do the decal edge and then fold them and press them, and then I will go back and trim off one side because it's a little bit too tall for my books right now. Okay, we are now a week into this project and all 5 books are at the exact same stage. That stage is that their covers are finished. their pages are finished. So this one has some purple end sheets, and then has white pages on the inside, has a decal edge. So these books are ready and waiting to get their holes punched for their bindings and to actually be finished and sewn. So each book's a little bit different. Some of them have blank pages in them. Some of them have, illustrations that I reused from the original books. The one thing that everyone has is a decal edge. That is the soft edge here on the side. Every single book has that, and they will all be bound the same way using a multi-needle Coptic binding. So we have 2 that have lined pages and 3 that have blank pages. We have 2 that have colorful signature covers, and the others are just white. So the next thing I have to do is pick out some threads to use, and that's always kind of a fun little moment to figure out what I'm going to use. These covers in particular, they are nice because they have a different color. So say this one has kind of this reddish pink color to highlight. This one, I mean, the obvious choice would be that, but it might be a little too matching. So the next step for me is really to just figure out, based on if there's colorful paper on the spine and on the front, what color thread I'm going to use. I may use red for this one because it will look nice with the purple. It doesn't match this one exactly, but I think that's okay. Another option would be to use this more rusty color one, which when it's sewn through will look closer to this color. So I have some decisions to make, as well as for the long winter. This one's blue and purple, but I don't know if I want to use purple on here, or maybe if I wanted to use a darker blue. So those are the next steps for me, punching all the holes and figuring out where I want everything spaced, and then choosing my thread colors. I'll sew them up once all of that is done. The sewing will probably take me another day or 2, and then I will put them all under weights and have them press for an additional day or 2, and then they will get shipped out. So I will check back in when I'm a little bit farther along in the process. All right, it is Wednesday, so I'm a week and a half in. I am on my very last book. This has been a hot debate. So if you follow me over on Instagram, there was a very hearty debate on what thread color I should use. I finally just decided I'm going to use the light purple. It matches the signature covers, and I think it looks nice with the front here. I didn't want to pull in too many other colors. I know this is a kind of subtle choice for what I typically do, but especially because the end sheets are yellow and we're already doing a lot, so I decided to just keep it simple, let the purple stand out with the other purple on the front cover, and then just let it blend in here. So that was kind of why this last book was out and waiting to be done. So I'm gonna do a few stitches here for you. If you want to see the full process, I'm using a multi-needle Coptic binding, and this is something that I used on all of the books in this series. If you want a full tutorial on this, I do have an extensive one on my channel here, so you can go check that out. I'm sure I will link it down in the description box. But this is I love this stitch. It makes a nice, really neat rows of stitches on the spine. The one tricky thing, if you've never done it, is just kind of at the start figuring out how much thread you need, but then also keeping everything neat and tidy. You can see here that as I pull my threads through, I am always just trying to keep them straight up and down, or sometimes I'll pull them, you know, the outer ones to the side a little bit just to give myself a little bit more room and keep them from getting tangled up. Now, that's all to say, I still have times where I get them tangled up. I recently did a very chunky rainbow colored book, and that one had, I think, about 28 different signatures. And I used single pieces of thread for it. I did not want to tie a knot in there anywhere, so I used really epically long thread. So that was a hot mess at the very beginning. But of course, as you go through more and sew more, the thread gets shorter, so it gets easier. But anyway, I digress. So we've got our threads going in here. I always like to just tighten them up a little teeny bit before I start sewing. And then let's see if I can do this with a closer view here. So just wrapping underneath. This is why you need the curved needles for this type of binding, so you can get underneath there. When I very first started, I did make some Coptic books with straight needles, and I made it work, but it was a little challenging. You can find curved needles obviously at bookbinding suppliers, but if you're just looking for something local that you could pick up, I recommend going to a craft store and looking in their sewing section, because these are often called upholstery needles, and usually you can find them there. So if you just want to try them out without investing in shipping costs and fancy needles, that's what I would recommend. Okay, so I've got a couple more signatures to add and then the back cover, and I will check in with you when my very last book is all finished. All right, they are all done. I'm really excited. Let's take a closer look at each one. This is the Reader's Digest condensed volume. So I added the book plate back. It was on this fly leaf originally, so I added that there. We've got a signature wrapper in a different color. All the pages are decal edge and blank pages on this one. And that is a nice dark gray thread there. This one was, like I mentioned before, a tricky one to pick out that thread color. But I used the original end sheet here, again, a purple signature wrapper and blank kind of creamier pages. And again, a decal edge there as well. This next one, I used a nice bright red thread, and this was one that had lined pages, so I printed all of these out, and again a decal edge just to add to the soft texture of the book. Long Winter, I went with a nice blue thread to pull out this color, even though it's a little bit darker. I wanted to still go with the blue here. This was one that I had to cover up some of the original markings because it was a library book. And then I just went with a nice soft cream colored paper. And I did keep the original pocket in the back, and it was great that it still had the card. There were no names or anything on the card, so I felt comfortable keeping that there. And then this last one, Little Town on the Prairie, went with a dark green thread, kind of similar to the Long Winter. And just like that one, I actually had to cover up markings on this as well. So I used an entire piece of the end sheet here to cover the entire front original. And then this one had lined pages and a decal edge too. And I was also able to keep the library pocket on this one as well. So thank you so much for following along with this whole project. I hope that you found it interesting. If you have any questions, definitely leave them for me down in the comments below. And the next step is to get these all packaged up and shipped out to the client. And I hope that you will think about subscribing to my channel so you can follow along for more projects I do in the future. Thanks. Bye.